I was betrayed and fired. I destroyed the business of the former boss. I'm not the type to hold grudges or seek revenge. I struggle with severe anxiety and bipolar disorder, so conflicts usually trigger panic attacks and deep depression. Typically, I just shrug it off and try to avoid similar situations in the future. But there's one thing I can never let go of: betrayal. This is the story of how I brought down my former boss's business after she stabbed me in the back. I worked at a small private medical center near my home in a small town. Initially, I was hired to help patients with daily tasks, cooking, cleaning, and so on. But as vacancies opened up, I climbed the ladder, taking on whatever duties my boss, the business owner, assigned me. At one point, I even became the medical billing manager, despite having no experience in the field. She threw me into the role because no one else was available until her daughter got out of prison. She'd been incarcerated for drug-related charges. After that, I was reassigned to data entry, which suited me fine. I'm good with numbers, type quickly, and know my way around a computer. None of these positions came with benefits. I never got a pay raise for taking on new roles, nor did I receive any bonuses. The only increase I got in nearly 2 years was a standard 50-cent per hour raise after 6 months. Let me explain the company structure. The owner started it about 3 years before I joined, with zero business management experience. Her sister had some expertise, but the owner believed it was time to spread her wings and that this was God's plan for her, or something like that. Hiring was a circus. She brought in family members, including her ex-husband, and gave them priority in everything. She had several foster kids whom she pulled into the business, appointing them to leadership roles, despite their complete lack of experience or competence. Some of these managers were fresh out of prison or on probation for drugs or other crimes. I took the job to help myself. It sounds odd, but I'd been unemployed for years, because anxiety and depression make it hard for me to interact with people. This seemed like a good starting point to rebuild my life and create a future for myself and my amazing wife. I have a lot of debt from poor decisions. Depression makes you stop caring about the future, and I hope to dig myself out of the hole and move forward. I poured my heart and soul into this place, always striving to make it better. What happened crushed me. I was trying to open up to the world, only to get stabbed in the back by someone I trusted. The company, due to its small size and the owner's lack of experience managing a medical facility, was riddled with problems. Bills weren't sent out on time, the network was unsecured, and patient complaints went ignored. The list goes on. As I became more involved, I noticed countless organizational and security issues, including a couple of serious violations related to medical insurance. These needed to be fixed. That Friday, I showed up to work, started my usual database maintenance tasks, and then went upstairs to ask the office manager, who wasn't related to the owner, if she had any assignments for me. The owner was with her, which was odd since she was usually running errands outside the office. But it wasn't unheard of. When I arrived that morning, my computer wasn't working, which wasn't unusual either. The IT guy was her current husband, not a bad guy, but man, look who he married. I greeted the owner and asked if there were network issues. She said yes, so I didn't think anything of it and returned to my desk to tackle simpler tasks. About 15 minutes later, the owner and the general manager came into the room and said they needed to speak with me privately. This didn't alarm me. She'd done this before when reassigning me to new roles, so I assumed I was being moved again. She pulled out one of the company's iPads, which were used for onboarding new patients, specifically for taking their photos and adding them to electronic medical records. I'd been roped into this process after the previous administrator, who handled it, was fired. I don't have much experience with Apple products. I just did whatever the owner told me. Then she asked me to come closer and showed me the screen. The iPad was registered to someone who had no connection to the facility. I later found out who it was. I'll get to that part. This is unacceptable, she said. It's a violation of healthcare laws, and we could face serious consequences. The iPad had the company's branded loading screen and everything. I had no reason to think it wasn't secure, especially since the owner herself had instructed us to use it that way. I didn't see it as my responsibility, especially since I used the devices the same way everyone else did. I always tried to address issues as they came up, particularly if they required urgent action to avoid violations or fines. I said, okay, how can we fix this? I'm ready to help. She looked me straight in the eye and said, we're fixing it by firing you. I was stunned, staring at her in disbelief, hoping I'd misunderstood. I asked, you're firing me? She replied, yes. I swear, A faint smirk crossed her face as she said it. I glanced at the general manager. She was either crying or trying to hide it. I asked why I was being fired for something beyond my control, something I did under her direct instructions. But the owner just stayed silent, then told me I needed to leave. I was close with everyone in the office, except her relatives, so I said goodbye to the others, hugged them, and broke down in tears. The whole time the owner stood behind me with that smug smirk on her face. That's when I knew this wouldn't end well for her. So about the problems she created for herself, I was friends with almost everyone at the facility, including the counselors. One of them had been considering quitting for a while, and I'd repeatedly convinced him to stay, telling him to hang in there, that things would get easier next week, and so on. I was fired on a Friday, and later I heard from another former employee that the counselor quit the following Monday. I can't say for sure he left because of my firing, but the timing was awfully suspicious. After him, another employee left, then two more. In the end, the owner was left with just two counselors to handle both inpatient and outpatient care. One had just returned from maternity leave. I feel so bad for her. I hope she quit too, because she was a joy to work with. The other had only handled outpatient care before, not the more intensive inpatient program. I like to think the owner set off a domino effect, but I can't say for certain. Having worked in nearly every role at the company, I knew its inner workings inside out, how much money they were still trying to collect from insurance companies, what technical issues they faced, and most importantly, what violations they were committing. When I moved to database management, the security issues became glaringly obvious, and I immediately reported them to the owner so she could fix them. On the technical side, the electronic medical record system had no patient access levels. Literally everyone, down to the janitors, could view consultation details and critical notes. Worse, the system was easy to hack. You could log in from any computer, even a personal one at home. I brought these issues to the owner's attention, along with several state law violations that needed urgent action. For example, employees couldn't access copies of current Department of Homeland Security regulations or work instructions. On the organizational side, new patient onboarding was initially done in an archive room where folders with patients' personal files were scattered in cardboard boxes, with names visible on every box. If more than one or two clients arrived at once, they were sent to fill out paperwork in the dining area. Imagine being admitted to an inpatient facility and having your luggage searched in a dining hall where people are constantly walking by. The billing office was right next to the outpatient therapy room, and the door was often left open, with patients' names discussed out loud. The walls were paper thin, so patients in therapy could hear who was being talked about. Logs weren't updated regularly. The organization was total chaos. I even tried to organize years' worth of unsorted client files myself, hoping to scan and sort them. The worst part? I learned the owner and her daughter were overbilling insurance for old clients, and both were using illegal substances. I can't 100% confirm the owner was using, but I saw her daughter take a prescription drug from the medical center stock. A former employee who quit without notice had also accused the owner of drug use. When I got home the day I was fired, I was in shock. I just sat at my computer and cried. I'd given everything to that place, sacrificing countless hours. Overtime was paid, but if you worked extra hours, they scolded you for it. I stayed late almost every week to get the job done, neglecting my mental health recovery in the process, all for that job. My sadness slowly turned to rage. I'm not someone who gets angry easily, but when I do, it's real. So I took action. After filing for unemployment benefits, I started making calls. I contacted the Department of Health and filed a complaint against the facility, listing every patient confidentiality violation I knew of. They gave me the standard response: "We'll reach out if anything changes or if we need more information." Then I called every insurance company. I gave them the facility's tax ID and NPI number, the unique provider identification number. I knew all this from my time as the medical billing manager. I asked the insurance companies to review their contracts with the facility and audit the bills from that period. By the time I finished all the calls, I was completely drained. Update: a few weeks later, I logged into my unemployment account to check if my benefits had come through, only to see a hold on my account. The employer had claimed I was fired for negligence and misconduct. The employment office contacted me, asked a few questions, and initially determined I wasn't at fault, so I'd continue receiving benefits. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking the issue was resolved. Yeah, right. Then I got a letter in the mail. My former employer had filed an appeal, If the judge ruled I was indeed at fault, not only would my benefits stop, but I'd also have to repay everything I'd already received from future wages. Cue a couple of panic attacks. So, there I was, diving into everything, reading laws, reviewing the owner's submitted evidence, and noting every inconsistency and error in her claims. Then I started tracking down former colleagues who worked there with me. I reached out to the woman who'd quit without notice, and asked if she'd testify in my favor. At first she agreed, but later backed out. Turns out she was a key witness in another investigation against the same company, and her case involved the counseling side. Let me explain as simply as possible, without getting into too many details. One of the counselors had a specialized certification, and was the only one qualified to provide certain services. When she left, they replaced her with a trainee counselor, who was supposed to work under the supervision of a director with the proper credentials. The owner didn't have those credentials, but she kept advertising, providing and billing for those specialized services. I hope that makes sense. Back to my case. I hadn't spoken to this former colleague in a while, so I filled her in on how I'd been treated. She said it was complete nonsense, and that she and many others had used the iPad in the exact same way. I also asked if she recognized the name the iPad was registered to. She double-checked if I'd remembered the name correctly, and I said I was 100% sure. Then she told me it was a former patient. This colleague had been there since the company's founding, so I had no reason to doubt her. So the owner either bought or stole, who knows. An iPad from a former client, didn't wipe its data, and gave it to employees to transmit confidential medical information to the company's servers. I immediately called the Department of Homeland Security to update my original complaint with this new information. On the day of the unemployment appeal hearing, I was a wreck, on the verge of a panic attack. Then my phone rang. It took everything in me not to scream at the owner when I heard her grating, chain smoker voice. I was sitting with all my papers, notes, legal excerpts, and every piece of evidence I had. That's when she started making a ton of mistakes. I later found out she was driving to another court case that day and sent her daughter, the medical billing manager, to the hearing instead. Her daughter showed up completely unprepared. No notes, no evidence, nothing. It seems they were so confident they'd win that they decided to just wing it. The judge started asking the daughter questions, and the owner began feeding her answers over the phone. The judge had to ask her multiple times to stop interfering since she wasn't listed as a witness and wasn't officially representing the company. She didn't stop, but after 15 minutes, she had to leave for another court case. Her daughter was left alone. Here's the key part. In my state, if you file an appeal, the burden of proof is entirely on you. Apparently, neither the owner nor her daughter knew this, because they had no case prepared. The judge asked what happened, and they started lying so blatantly that the judge pointed out the inconsistencies himself, and even reminded them they were under oath, warning that lying could lead to perjury charges. The final nails in the coffin were the questions I asked the owner's daughter. Was I the only one using that device? I don't know, but you knew enough to fire me for it. Was the device new or used? Then how was it registered to someone else? And do you know that person? I don't know. It's a former patient, and so on. At one point, the judge asked, "Hold on, what specific law did he violate?" "He violated healthcare law." "Okay, can you cite the specific state law?" "No." "Well, if you wait 30 minutes, I can ask my mom." "No. You've had more than enough time to prepare your case." I just sat there smiling. I knew I'd won. We were told the court's decision would be mailed within 5 to 7 days, or sooner if the judge ruled quickly. 2 days later, I got the letter. I won the case. That's all great, but the owner's daughter accidentally caused the company a couple more serious blows. The iPad situation was automatically reported to the Department of Homeland Security as a potential healthcare law violation. About a week later, a private investigator called me and took an official statement regarding the iPad. I told him I'd already filed a complaint months ago and described everything in detail. He gave the standard line, "If we have further questions, we'll reach out." I thought that was the end of it. Then I got another letter. I saw the Department of Homeland Security logo and immediately panicked, thinking they'd found a way to challenge the appeal decision. But the letter wasn't from my state's DHS, it was from the federal agency. I nearly passed out opening it. The letter stated that my complaint had been investigated, and the findings were escalated to the federal level. I didn't know how to react. I never intended to take things to the feds, and I don't know how much trouble the owner is in now. That's where things stand. The owner is seriously ill and no longer shows up to work, according to a few former colleagues. who still keep in touch. She's also lost other court cases, and it looks like she's facing prison time for insurance fraud. Her daughter might face jail for violating her probation terms, since she's been using drugs again. I spoke with one colleague who said that after all this came to light, several more employees quit. Most said they didn't want to get caught up in the fallout of illegal activities. Many of them, by the way, already have criminal records, and this kind of violation isn't forgiven. Companies like this get shut down, and people like that go to jail. Oh, it's gonna be a spectacular finale. That's the story. What's your take on it? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Obviously, the author got incredibly lucky here. Most firings don't end in such a dramatic showdown. Maybe you've got similar stories to share. Thanks for sticking with this video until the end. Check out our previous video, which you'll see right here. And good luck to you all.